Welcome to In the Bucket. I'm Dan Maitland, your host, fleet manager of Ajax Paving. Got a special friend here, Ben Preston from Gearflow. And today we are going to talk about parts procurement and solving the world's problems of backordered parts.
One part at a time.
One part at a time. And we're going to do it, and we're not going to take ourselves too seriously, because that's the whole point of being in the bucket, Ben. Remember?
Can't trust a guy who's too serious while in a bucket.
While in a bucket. And this isn't like some green screen, right? This is not some green screen. We are literally in a bucket on a Tuesday, Ajax Paving. So how did we get started, right? I had this idea, walking by the shop one day, there was a loader in the bay and two chairs, just like this, sitting outside. I'm like, wait a minute, that would be funny. Just put two dudes, like see me in my office, two dudes in a bucket, doesn't have to be a dude, in a bucket, and let's talk about something.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be too stiff. And let's talk about industry challenges. We're in construction, we're in parts, we're in fleet management. And part of the reason I wanted you here, Ben, is to introduce people to Gearflow. I think it's an important product. I would consider your company industry disruptor. And I think that's very cool. You know, to start something new that doesn't exist, you're going to be disruptive. So hats off to you, man, because it's a brave, uncharted world. And we'll talk about implementation challenges, successes, and stuff like that. But yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about Gearflow.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me into your bucket. It's my first time in a bucket, so huge deal for me. So I guess how we got going, we found parts is mission critical. That's like the beating heart of a fleet team, right? Equipment breaks down, need the parts on that machine as fast as possible. That process doesn't really get a lot of love. And we felt like, man, there's got to be ways to simplify this thing so we can get parts on machines faster. And I think when you and I first, and Sarah first started talking about that, you kind of vibed with that, because first recognizing the chaos that comes from parts procurement and trying to simplify things for your team, but then also the financial implications of not getting parts to machines fast is something that you were trying to solve for. You said hats off to me for leading a company that's disrupting, but also hats off to you for taking the leap, because probably what we're going to talk about is it's not a light switch, but there's a lot of benefits that come out of it. So in a nutshell, what Gearflow does is we're software that makes it easier for you to work with your dealers on parts, kind of on the surface. But ultimately what we're trying to do here is we feel like we can offer Ajax a competitive advantage that allows you to scale your fleet team, and it allows you to scale your fleet without the added cost, the chaos, and overhead that comes with the more parts needed for that fleet.
So how'd you get started? You like woke up one day and like, I'm going to start a tech company. I mean, how'd you guys get started?
Yeah. So I am not from this industry. My partner Luke, his family business is actually an equipment dealer. They are a like aerial lift rental company. And so he felt firsthand the pains of down equipment and not getting the parts that they needed fast. And they're a dealer, so never mind one step removed, contractors were dealing with that pain even more so. I come from the tech side. He and I have known each other for a long time. And we're like, man, there's got to be a better way. So we took the leap 5 years ago is when we first got started. And the first premise was maybe we pull all these great parts suppliers that are out there, put them on a marketplace, give you guys an alternative source to basically find parts when you need other options, right? And that's usually when things are on back order from your dealers. And that was all well and good, but we found people would come, they'd find Gearflow, they'd buy a part via Google, and then they wouldn't come back. They'd leave rave reviews, they'd love it, but they wouldn't come back. We're like, huh, that's weird. And what we found is that's not how parts are bought, right? No one wants to buy a part by, going by a computer, dragging it into a shopping cart, and checking out like it's paper towels. So we had to find, really how our parts bought, and it's you're calling your guy. You're calling the guy that you have a relationship for a while, you trust that person to kind of share in the accountability of the downtime of that equipment to get you the part you need. So we wound up building a full suite of software to really mimic that process, to meet you guys on where you need to buy parts. That's next evolution, which is what got us to working together, which is how do we consolidate everything in a way that lets you work with the dealers you already work with in an easier way than just having parts in a marketplace.
That's perfect. And if you hear the live trucks in the background, that's because we are not in a studio. We are in the shop at Ajax Paving in Venice, Florida. Yeah. So production will continue, whether we're in the bucket or not. And this loader has to get back to the job when we're done, Ben. Yeah. So that's something.
With or without us on it.
So that's a great story. I met Gearflow, you guys through AEMP and Association Equipment Management Professionals, which you need to check out, anybody in the fleet management world. Introduced you guys, seemed cool. It took a while to really figure out what you did. You know, I'm like, oh great, another startup company. They're out there. But there was something a little bit different, and I feel like that's something unique, and that's why I feel like you guys are onto something. The parts challenge is real after COVID and in the world we live in. It's like the new normal of availability and back order and delays. My first introduction to you guys was to solve the problem of back order.
Yeah, totally. And that was how we started working with a lot of fleet teams like yourselves. Was when we first built that software I was describing, it was all about helping source hard to find parts, right? We were always that alternative kind of like lifeline, especially during COVID and there's all these back orders. Dealer is out on a part, you're left to calling around, right? And you're left to your own devices like Google around, call around. You're like, if you're on Google, you're having a bad day. And so we figured, man, there's probably an easier way for us to sort of unlock these alternative options when you need that hard to find part. And so that's really that like part sourcing problem is where we started with a lot of AEMP members and a lot of big fleets. But that helped kind of open up the kimono, right? So we started working with you guys as well as others and got to learn your process, right? Got to learn not just the unhappy path that might happen 5% of the time, but also what are all the things that are painful in the 95%? And everything from when the first moment that part's needed in the field by that technician, all the way to the moment that it's received, and all of the steps and the people that are involved along the way. If we can digitize that whole process and not just focus on the hard to find, but everything, then we really have an opportunity to impact the bottom line.
I think that's the key, Ben, is you said it, digitizing. So those that are wondering still, what is Gearflow? Essentially, it's digitalizing the parts procurement process in a world of phone calls, text messages, emails, you name it, smoke signals. I mean, you survey your average parts procurement process and it involves all those processes. Like, I might call this guy, and that's might be some of the biggest challenge. Another great question, why would you go start a technology solution in a delayed construction industry that doesn't embrace change, that doesn't embrace technology? I mean, you guys must be crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy, but to me, that just means there's so much opportunity to innovate. And I think a lot of tech companies haven't really hit their stride maybe because they haven't been able to spend the time alongside and like listen and learn to the real problems that are being dealt with at these companies. Instead, it's, I'm here to save the day and I'm here to tell you what to do. So we really co-designed, all of our software is co-designed alongside a lot of our customers to really hit the pains that you guys are dealing with firsthand, right? And what we found, back to your point around digitizing the process, is really stems around three problems we found were like overwhelming pattern. You guys, in general, just had limited access to the vendors that you work with, as well as alternative options when you need them. So how can we open up and maximize, the amount of access you have to these guys that you already trust? The other one was the communication, and it's chaotic, right? You're talking phone calls, smoke screens, Post-it notes on Dave's desk overnight, you name it. And each one of those phone calls, each one of those lines of communication can create error, can create miscommunication. So we had to figure out how do we streamline those lines of communication, both internally, but as well as with the vendors that you guys are working with. And then the third theme was visibility, right? So you don't order parts, right? Unless like it's a really bad day maybe. But
that would be a bad day.
Yeah, but you're responsible for the uptime of your fleet and the process as to which that fleet is getting back up and running. But without having any visibility into, man, who approved this order or why are we buying the same part this many times? You're kind of always in this firefighting mode and reacting to problems, and you don't have the opportunity to get out in front of problems. So you have a goal of getting under 5% urgent requests. That's a hard thing to do if you don't know what's causing these urgent requests, right? So we can have all of your parts purchasing run through one place. Now you have the data and the visibility to understand, well, here are my opportunities for continual improvement. So we focused on those three things. The only reason we found those out is because we had the opportunity to work alongside and really actually come into the shop, get into an actual bucket, and really live these problems. And I think that might be why tech is sort of behind the times within this space, because not many people are doing that.
So what you're saying is we were actually doing actual work before we
Yeah.
did this. This
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of actual work before we got in the bucket.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
fair.
So those are the little things I think is a great opportunity for tech. Instead of replace these relationships, how do we use tech to enhance the relationships for you to better work with these dealers you already trust? I think it's oftentimes perceived as we're replacing the human relationship, but actually, I think it's actually enhancing is what we're focused on.
That's a good point, because in our industry, I think it's safe to say the value of a handshake, the value of looking somebody in the eye, your word still means something. So I think that's part of the fear of removing that.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the initial, potentially one of the biggest challenges is if we're talking about changing the game and revamping the parts ordering process, that relies on buy-in from vendors
Yep.
and suppliers. And let's face it, they might not be open arms because they're afraid of losing that human touch and losing the relationship.
Right.
So I think that's one of the biggest things to work on.
Implementation is hard because it's change, like you're asking change. So what hurdles have you run into with that, and how have you found success?
I think implementation is the single biggest hurdle anytime you implement change, like you said. And the way we've tried to tackle it, it's a work in progress, but you have to meet with the vendors or the party that has buy-in in the situation. So for parts procurement, that means meeting with the vendors,
Yeah.
because they play a pivotal role. And if they're not supporting you, then it's not going to work either.
Yep.
Luckily for us, we are the customer, and we have a little bit of pull. So that's as the contractor, as the parts buyer, we buy equipment. You know what, guys? You want to change the industry? The vendors, they're going to support you because they want your money.
Yeah.
So that's the power we have. So, but now it's a partnership, because it's us, it's the dealers, it's OEMs, but really for parts procurement, it's really us and dealers and suppliers. So it's meeting with them, having a relationship with them, explaining what we're trying to do here. Hey guys, we're trying to streamline our process and make improvements. And ultimately, it's going to make your job easier too. So if you don't find ways to make somebody's job easier, they're not going to want to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing, is displaying how it's going to make the job easier. Well, you're going to be able to track your orders. You don't have to look up emails from the past, text messages, phone logs. Am I unavailable? Oh, he didn't answer my call. I tried calling him 2 times in a row. Well, put a message in the portal and they're going to get to it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about too real quick the actual process. Okay, so those that don't know how Gearflow works.
Yeah.
All right, so walk me through it. So I'm a mechanic and I need a part. How does it work?
Yeah.
How do you explain the process?
So it's pretty simple, and it really, if you think about that phone call process, it actually kind of mirrors similar to what your process was before, but in a digitized format. Technicians out in the field gets a call, they go figure out what's wrong with the machine. We have a Gearflow app, so they open up their app, they say, we have your fleet already loaded up. So they say it's unit 123, which is our CAT D6, serial number XYZ. Here are the parts that I need. So they plug in the parts they need with or without part number, take any pictures that might help the dealer with the context, press submit. So that request gets sent out. For you guys, you have it set up where you have Dave, who is handling all requests in first. So requests flow into Dave, and he's the one that's ultimately sending it out to the dealers, right? So it's a one-click button out to the dealers. That essentially is step 2, which is cutting the PO, right? So they're sending a request to the dealer to receive price and availability back. Dealer sends price and availability back. Dave's sending PO over, and then from there, they're just asking for the dealer to mark it when it's ready for pickup or out to ship, and that notifies everyone on your team of when it's ready, and the parts get delivered. So it's really only a couple steps from request to delivery, but it sort of mirrors that existing process that you guys have, and we're not asking the dealers or the technicians to do anything that they wouldn't be doing otherwise, but it's just all captured in that digital format.
So that's a good point. So, and I think the current way for most of our industry, we tie up somebody on the phone, if they answer. We've called vendors and they don't answer sometimes. Love you, vendors, but it happens. And then I feel like they're working through that process. So they pick up the phone. What's your serial number? So probably the first 5 minutes of the call is verifying serial number, accuracy, and then they're checking stuff. If it's available, boom. So we just tied up 10 minutes of somebody's time. Now there's no record of that.
Right.
I think that's why a solution like Gearflow, that's where I saw the value, is by the time you even put in the request, we're giving all the valuable information to the dealer or supplier. You got VIN number, we're not mistyping.
Yeah. And all we're asking them to do is price and availability, right? So we're asking for price and availability just like they would give on a phone call. They put price and availability back, and instead of them having to call back, trying to hunt down you guys, get approval for a quote or whatever, it notifies everyone on your side right away. Price availability is back from your local dealer, indicate to the dealer whether you want it or not, right? So that's the next step. And from there, that gives your team the ability to have all your vendors in one place. You're not having to call this guy, this cat dealer, or this John Deere dealer, or whatever to confirm orders, right? So it kind of enables Dave, who's one-man band over there, kind of like the power of many.
I think it's a miracle right now we're actually not sweating.
Yeah.
Like we're in Florida in a shop, not AC.
I think once I stand up, it's all good.
Okay. Anyway, well, Ben, thank you so much for joining me in the bucket.
Yeah.
Hope it was as good for you as
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Tell your friends.
Can't wait. I'm gonna call my mom right afterwards and be like, Mom, guess what? I made it.
And keep up the good work, man. I think you guys are onto something. Keep disrupting the industry. I think this is what's important, and that's part of my message is getting people out here for our industry of fleet management, maintenance, and let's just see what's out there. And let's highlight some people, bring some friends, consider you guys friends, and let's take over the world, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
let's do it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it.